So HiRez made a top 5 list. And I don't mean a top 5 playlist, I mean they made an actual top 5 gods list. As if that in itself isn't surprising enough, the reaction is even more interesting. So today we'll be talking about HiRez top 5 winningest gods list, and we'll also look at some other top 5 winningest gods list from different perspectives, so maybe we can get a bit more behind that all. But first of all, let's get to the reception of the video, because people are mad. People are angry, outright offended with this video. 1/4 of the video's votes are downvotes, and the comments are angry too. The most upvoted comment in the comment section is asking why this gameplay is so bad. And you could think that is maybe just one, but literally almost all of the comments that are highly upvoted are talking about the gameplay being so bad. So why is the audience so upset with the gameplay in this video? If you take a closer look, it really looks like they just got their intern to record some quick footage for each of these characters and throw it together, and also throw in some old footage from Season 0, literal beta Smite, somebody's playing hell, and yeah, just put a few bot games here and there and just made some really quick clips that they could throw in there without the intent to impress anyone, but apparently that was a huge issue for the viewers. Even though this is just a 2-minute video, they wanted high-level plays. They specifically, some of them asked for SPL players sending in clips or showing old clips from the SPL so that people would not get a bad impression of these 20 seconds of each god. I mean, I guess I shouldn't really be surprised knowing that a large fraction of the Smite community likes to trash talk literally every clip they see on YouTube from random gameplay on gods that people haven't played for years or pro level play. They will always talk trash and always say how bad it is and whatever. But in this case, I guess you can actually be upset that they didn't put a little bit more effort into it. But I think the more important point about this video isn't actually the gameplay. I couldn't really care less what's in the background. I would probably not watch it all too intensely anyways and just listen to what's being said. What I find to be the bigger problem is the list itself. The list is the top 5 most winning gods. But what we're not told is at what point in time this was measured, which patch this is on, or anything about the modes that are factored in, the level of play that is factored in. So these stats are somewhat useless if you really throw together all modes that Smite has, including modes like Duel, and then just create a list out of those intensely different modes with a very different player base, because it doesn't say anything about a ratio in which the modes are weighed against each other here either. Then you get some gods that are simply not good in one mode but can be really good in another, and vice versa. Or you end up with some gods that are actually like middle of the pack but are okay enough in every mode to end up in the top 5 because there is no really a mode where they drop off. So it's confusing. It doesn't help that the order of this top 5 isn't even clarified at the start. So it starts with the first of our top 5 is Anubis, which sounds like this is spot number 1, but then the next one is Capri, so you'd think it's spot number 2. Then spot number 3 goes to Ragnar, and then suddenly, no, now we're at spot number 2, so Anubis was actually number 5. So yeah, I guess if you do a top 5, you can start from the bottom, but you can also start from the top, so that doesn't help either and makes it even more confusing for new players. The strange thing is that this whole thing seems to be targeted at new players because all of these gods get a quick beginner summary with them of how they play and what they do. If this was actually targeted at beginners to help them choose their gods, then it would absolutely be necessary to keep the structure very clear so they know which gods plays where, and also to make it clear which modes this is referencing to. So the top 5 on this list are, starting from the bottom: 5 Anubis, number 4 Capri, 3 Arachne, number 2 Hel, and number 1 we'll just call her Sissy. If you revert that, then you know who it is. And while some of these are familiar faces, I haven't seen Hel on the top realms of Conquest, at least, in a very long time. Aside of listing these gods, I think it's also important to clarify to people why gods are in the place that they are, why they are performing so well, which especially is interesting with a god like Hel to me, who doesn't seem to have had any significant impact on the meta lately. So maybe this is an assault thing, maybe that's why she has such high stats here, or an arena thing as well, where it makes a lot of sense, but we don't get this information. Luckily, we don't need to rely on these stats alone. There are 2 great sources within the Smite community, that provide us with additional stats that we can work with here. One of that is Smite GG, which focuses on ranked stats primarily, and the other one is CasualSmite.com, which, as the name implies, focuses on casual modes, including Casual Conquest as well. And looking at Smite GG's list, we get a very different outlook already. If we're looking at Conquest across all ranks, but ranked only, on patch 6.10, then in spot number 5 we have Capri, we already had them on the other list. In spot number 4 we have Hades, who did not appear on the other list. In spot number 3 we have Arachne. In spot number 2 we have Kali, also a new contender. And in spot number 1 we have Sissy again. But then when we look at higher divisions only, things already change. Diamond Plus is a bit too skewed at the moment because there's just not enough sample size on patch 6.10. So Freya, for example, has a single game that she won and that's why she has 100% win rate. But Platinum Plus already has a reasonable sample size. And here we see in spot number 5 Anubis, basically the same as HiRez list here. But in spot number 4 we have Terra. In spot number 3 we have Bastet. In spot number 2 we have Sun Wukong. Then only in spot number 1 we have Sissy again. So you can absolutely see how the divisions have a very drastic impact on the best or most winningest god here, with the exception of spot number 1, which really stays the same so far. Can we also say why these gods are where they are? Probably. Anubis is a god that was already performing decently enough according to HiRez Ajax himself, and then also got a buff very recently that facilitated his whole kit a little bit more with a cooldown reduction and some mana cost reduction, so he's doing well, of course. Terra has recently seen a little bit of a resurgence in the SPL, but not only that. Her pick rate is the lowest of these 5 gods, meaning that the people that pick her probably know what they're doing for the most part. And she has the best go signal in rank that you can have on any support or solo or jungle, wherever you want to play her, due to her ultimate just kinda giving you an all-in option because you deal more damage, you heal yourself more and everything. So she is the type of god that you want for a loosely coordinated team that needs a bit of a push in one direction. The third goddess here, Bastet, is harder to explain. I think this is partially down to a relatively low pick rate as well, not much more than Terra. But at the same time, that alone can't really explain a win rate that high. Maybe it is the fact that Heartseeker got a change and maybe Bastet is actually doing better with that against the current meta, against tankier targets at least, and that helps her to some degree. Or it is due to the fact that her win rate is massively higher in Platinum than it is in Diamond, and that just kind of skews the curve in, otherwise she would be significantly lower, which is kind of indicated by her win rate being fairly far below 50% in Diamond Plus, but then again, that's a very small sample size. Sun Wukong, on the other hand, is easy to explain because he just recently got a pretty drastic buff. With Undefeated Body now lasting for 10 seconds after being above the health threshold again, you get 50 physical power and 30 protection for a pretty long time, and that will most definitely have an impact on the battlefield, especially when you keep in mind that he can just drop below that health threshold and then ult to heal back up again and stay in the fight. As his Master's Will has also been buffed at the same time, he might be a bit underestimated by many at the moment, and that obviously pushes his performance even more because people haven't played against him in a long time, and then if the character is good on top of that, you end up with something like this, or with something like Sissy, our spot number 1, who is in a similar situation where she got massive buffs all around in patch 6.8, so heavily buffed that she actually needed multiple nerfs since then, and still people hadn't played against her much before, so there was this adjustment period, and that overall means she's just doing very well in every regard, and that is why she is also consistently in spot 1 on these lists here. But that doesn't mean that she would be spot 1 on all lists, because again we also have CasualSmite.com, and when we select the experienced player base here, which makes sense because the players below level 30 have completely different metas, things are just very different when you're just learning the game, but at some point you have a bit more of established things, then we'll see that our number 1 from the other list doesn't even show up in the top 5 here at all. And ironically, the list here is pretty different from the Smite GG list for all ranks of Conquest as well. So even between all ranks of Conquest and Casual Conquest, we see very different performance. In spot number 5 we have Guan Yu here, and I absolutely cannot tell you why. In ranked he hardly shows up in the lists at all, and here he is spot number 5. Guan Yu didn't receive any changes in the past year really, and sure, there were some item changes that affect him in one way or another. Maybe that is it, maybe it's Pridwin or something. But overall, there doesn't seem anything major that would suddenly push him so much, and there's no real reason why he would be so much better in casual, unless maybe he's just slept on in ranked. In spot number 4 we have Skadi, which is less surprising actually, because she got a buff not too long ago, which allowed her to actually throw her dog. And with that, her performance has gone up and people felt that she was stronger, but in ranked this doesn't reflect as much as it does in casual Conquest apparently. Spots number 3, 2 and 1 on the other hand are faces that we've seen before. Anubis, who we have already talked about. We have HiRez in spot number 2, also a god that is pretty consistent on these lists here. I guess he's just a harder god to lane against due to his sustain, and he brings decent teamify tools at this point with all these changes. So that combined with the fact that not that many people play him makes him relatively hard to play against. And when your team lacks a little bit of coordination, HiRez can absolutely abuse that. And then in spot number 1, Arachne again. Also a god that has been good for quite a while. She has been very performant and she got some nerfs to not be that strong anymore because she has so much snowball potential and she has so much self-sustain and often makes sure that games are basically over by the time you get to late game, and even there she has some tools to do things now. And just for the sake of having a bit of a different picture, I also wanted to take a look at the Joust stats for experienced players. Here in spot number 5 we have HiRez again, in spot number 4 we have Xingtian, in spot number 3 we have once again Guan Yu, in spot number 2 however we have Chak, in spot number 1 we have Aphrodite. What we can tell here is a bit of a pattern of sustain gods and big AoE gods being relatively performant in Joust, and that shouldn't be surprising because you have those relatively narrow areas with less ways to avoid things, and also of course 2 teammates that are consistently healed up, or less teammates to look out for when healing can help those gods. But still, it's interesting that we're looking at a completely different list once again here, where we see certain patterns between some of these stats between different modes, but none of them really align with the list that HiRez originally gave us as a whole. We can always see small bits of them here and there, but never a complete picture. And that's what I wanted to get at the end of this video again here. We have so many different outcomes for the top 5 list here, depending on which exact factors we choose to look at here and which we do not want to look at. And it just makes for overall completely different stats, which means that just making a top 5 list of gods across Smite in general isn't really helpful because you can't really use that. You can't play all modes at once. You can't even queue for all modes at once anymore. So the usefulness of a list like that is a bit arguable. Even the usefulness of these individual top 5 lists can of course be debated, because a god performing well doesn't mean that you're going to perform well with that god if you don't have the experience with that god. So there's still a factor of practice that is very much relevant when it comes to the performance of gods as well. This is all a bit complicated by the fact that there's a bigger disconnect between the SPL meta and the ranked meta than there was in previous seasons as well, which means copying things from the SPL is very, very complicated at this point and often not useful. And with that, I conclude this, I suppose, deep dive of the most winning gods that we have in Smite at the moment. And as much as HiRez list was criticized, I still think it was interesting that it was posted, and it gave me a point for conversation here as well. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.